Hi readers, Chris here. Today I'm going to be talking about not only my favorite Stephen King book, but one of my absolute top 10 favorite books of all time, and that's going to be Misery. Woohoo! I have read Misery a few times, but most recently I just read it last month as part of a buddy read with one of my followers over on Instagram, Athena Leon. I tag her, but she's not on BookTube. So anyway, I'm going to spend the first half of this video talking non-spoiler reviews, world building, characters, and plot, and then at the very end, I'm going to talk about some spoilers. I will warn you before that happens. So just a super quick setup in case for some reason you are not familiar with this amazing book. We have a author character named Paul Sheldon, and Paul has written a super popular series of books. They're called Misery, after the main character. He has just written his final Misery book, and he's kind of like done with the whole thing, and he has written a new book. He's celebrating. He gets into a car accident and he is rescued by this woman named Annie who claims to be his #1 fan. And of course, all Annie cares about is getting more misery in her life. Things ensue. That's all I'm going to say for the setup. So let's talk about world building. The great thing about Misery is that it takes place in one location, and that is Annie's house. Even within Annie's house, most of the book takes place in one room, the room that Paul is trapped in, which there are scenes that take place in other areas of Annie's house, but for the most part, you have Paul. He's trying to recover from the accident that he got in, and he can't really get around on his own. So everything takes place in this one location. And I think anytime you can have a movie, a book, whatever that takes place in one location and still make it super interesting, I think is amazing. It's amazing because there's so much stuff that you think, how much stuff can possibly happen if you're just trapped in one room for weeks on end? Let me tell you, you have no idea. You have no idea. So that's super quick world building. So let's talk about our characters. And obviously there are two main characters in our story, Paul and Annie. This book is told from Paul's point of view. So he is our main character. He's our main guy. He's the one that's been, for all intents and purposes, kidnapped, etc., etc. And in the beginning of the book, we don't really know that much about Paul, other than he's an author, he is super famous, and he has gotten to this point in his career where he's kind of jaded. He doesn't like the Misery books. He kind of thinks they're just like, fluff, and he isn't taking it seriously anymore. As the story goes on and we get to know Paul more and really get to see what goes on in his head, the fact that he is quote unquote jaded, you don't really realize how deeply that goes until the story goes on. But on the other hand, Paul, he is our victim in this story, and he is trying to save himself. So through a lot of the story, we are rooting for Paul because we want him to escape from Annie. And we only see Annie through Paul's eyes. And of course, Paul being in the position that he is, Annie is the villain. But here's the thing about Annie, though. Annie is not just your average villain. Your average villain is evil, could be psychotic, and Annie is all of those things. But the thing that makes Annie truly scary, and one of the greatest villains of all time, is that Annie is incredibly smart. She is super intelligent. So throughout the book, her and Paul kind of go back and forth. They have a little cat and mouse game going on because Paul's trying to escape. And every time that Paul thinks that he has the upper hand on her, Annie just comes back with a vengeance. Paul cannot outsmart her. He cannot cannot outsmart her because Annie is super smart. She has been trained as a nurse. She's super smart about medical things. She's super smart about there's so many things that she's super smart about that Paul really has a hard time figuring out how to quote unquote defeat her. So I think that is one of the things that makes Annie like so amazing. And really, even though Paul's the one that we see everything through, I really feel like Annie is the star of this book. Like, she just is. We learn so much about Annie throughout the story. Paul starts to peel back layers of Annie. He starts to learn more about her history, horrible things that she's done in the past, how she's gotten away with them. Like, how does she get to be who she is, this crazy person? Annie Wilkes, one of the greatest villains of all time. And when we get to the spoilers section, I'm going to talk a little bit more about how much I love Annie. I just can't go into too many details without giving away spoilers. So then we get to the plot. Now, I have said this about other Stephen King books before, but one of the things that King does really well in his writing is that he just knows how to create this sense of tension. So, and in the very first page in this book, we have Paul waking up after his car accident. The very first page. So there's no setup. He's already in this room. He's already in Annie's house. He's already with Annie. And from that very first page all the way to the end of the book, the tension just builds and builds and builds and builds. I have read this book before. I knew what was going to happen. And still, I was on the edge of my seat, biting my fingernails, going, oh my God, I know what's going to happen. Oh my God, I can't believe it's going to happen again. It's just, I don't know how to explain it. If you haven't read it, read it, because the way that he builds tension is just, it's just genius. It's just amazing. It's so much fun to read. So much fun to read. So now that I've gushed over the non-spoilery parts of this book, the last thing that I'm going to say is that this book is amazing. The characters are amazing. The plot is amazing. It's so much fun. But now I'm going to talk about some spoilers. So if you don't want to know anything about Misery, you're happy just knowing it's a great book, you can click out now. 3, 2, 1. If you're still here, I'm going to talk about some spoilers in Misery. And really, the main thing I want to talk about is going back to Annie and why she's one of the greatest villains of all time. Because I said before that she's smart, which is true. But she's not only is she smart, but she's also self-aware. And what I mean by that is there are scenes in the book, there's a couple times in the book where Annie decides that she has to leave Paul and leave the house and leave him alone and go to what she calls her laughing place. Because she is at a point where she's going to have a complete psychotic break, a complete meltdown, and she has to go off and be by herself. Which on one hand is frightening that would happen, but on the other hand, she is self-aware enough to know that she cannot be around other people when she's going through one of these episodes, and has the self-awareness and self-control to remove herself from the situation, go to her laughing place while this episode, plays itself out. I mean, wow, what sort of psychotic villain has the self-awareness and control to be able to do something like that? I mean, that's nuts. Here's the other thing about Annie that I really like. There's a lot of back and forth through the book because in Annie's eyes, she is helping Paul. She saved him from his accident. She's helping him write this book that's going to be the best book he's ever written. Through her eyes, through her warped sense of reality, she thinks that she's helping him. And in a way, she actually does help him. In a way, she actually does. Does she help him recover from his accident? Technically, yes, she does. Does she also get him addicted to painkillers and chop off his foot? Yes, that is true as well, but she does help him. Does she help him become a better author? Yes, technically she does. She demands excellence from him. And even Paul has to admit to himself that, like, he needs to write a book that's good enough for Annie, his number one fan. Crazy, right? And then the other thing I wanted to say is, because Annie thinks that she's helping Paul in her own way, I'm pretty sure, I'd have to go back and like look at every single line, but I'm pretty sure that Annie never lies throughout the book. She doesn't lie to Paul outright. When she says things like, hey, I saved your life, that's true. She did save his life. When she says that she's his number one fan, for all intents and purposes, she is his number one fan. Everything that Annie says is true. It's twisted in a way that makes it true to the situation, but Annie doesn't lie. And I think that's such a clever choice for her character. Super smart, super scary, super self-aware, does not lie. One of the greatest villains of all time. One of the other things I really, really, really enjoy about this book is its commentary on fandom and the concept of like what it means to be a fan. Because here's the thing, if you're a fan of anything, whether it's Star Wars, Marvel movies, Game of Thrones, whatever it is, when you love something and like something means a lot to you, there's a part of you that wants more of that thing. And I'm going to use Game of Thrones as an example. If you're familiar with Game of Thrones at all, we all know that it takes George R.R. Martin many, many, many years to write a book. And we've all been waiting now for his next book to come out for years and years and years. Like, I think we can all admit that deep down, there is a small part of us that, like, would love to, like, lock him in a room somewhere and make him finish his book. Now, because we're normal people, no one would actually do that. But in this book, Annie takes that fandom to the next level. She takes Paul and forces him to write the book that she wants him to write. And I think there is a little bit of Annie in all of us. A little bit. Yes, none of us are crazy and would chop someone's foot off, I hope. But I think there's a little bit of Annie in all of us, which I think is, again, fascinating. And I really love Paul's process of writing through this book. I love his process of writing because when he first starts off writing this new Misery book, he's just doing it to placate Annie. He doesn't really care what happens in the book. He doesn't care about his characters, Misery being the main character. He doesn't care about Misery. He doesn't care what happens. His only thought is, oh, just get this book out and get Annie to leave me alone. But, you know, Annie demands more than that. She demands excellence. So Paul has to really, like, dig deep and really think about how to get back to the writer that he used to be. And he does. Throughout the course of the book, he does. And at one point, you can see there's like something switches in his head and he goes from, you know, really hating this book and these characters to actually getting invested in the story and wanting to make it the best that it could be. So again, I said this earlier in the video, but technically, Annie helped him get back to being a better writer, helped him get back to writing, enjoying writing, like, and like I said, in the beginning of this book, he's just a jaded author. He's just collecting paychecks. He doesn't care. But by the end, he's totally invested and he totally cares. So again, despite the fact that Annie cuts off his foot and does all these other horrible things to him, she does technically help him a little bit. Those are the main things I wanted to say about Misery. Hopefully you can tell from my babbling that I can talk about this book all day long because it's one of my favorites. Meepers, do you like Misery? Do you like that book? Yes? No? Are you just interested in what Mama's doing? Anywho, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel for more book reviews coming your way soon. Happy reading!